بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله بلغ الرسالة أدى الأمانة نصح الأمة كشف الغمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده وتركنا على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على نهجه المقتدى بسنة المهدي إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are still continuing our series of lectures entitled Immigration and Integration, Al-Hijrah wal-Indimaj. And we are trying to cover in the series the most important strategic work of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions over the course of 10 years in the Medina. The work in building the Muslim community identity, the work in integrating in da'wah and reform in all aspects of life, such as the moral, social, educational, political, economic, health, environment, etc. And also we will see how the Prophet ﷺ interacted with all the different groups of the Medina society, Muslims and non-Muslims, while he balanced the preservation of Islamic identity. My dear respected brothers and sisters, in my last lecture, if you recall, and if you didn't see it, you can see it, I think, through the videos because these videos are recorded. In my last lecture, I talked about the challenges that the Prophet ﷺ he faced based on his immigration from Mecca to Medina, and I listed around 8 differences between those two environments, even though that they are talking Arabic, but those are major differences between Mecca and Medina. And even the historians and the people who are specialized in the biography of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they listed more than 30. But I just put the top 8 differences between Mecca and Medina. So it's good to refer back to it and to look at these differences. But then we talked about the first project that the Prophet ﷺ executed in Medina, which is Al-Masjid, building Al-Masjid. He built first of all Masjid Quba at the edge of the Medina, where he stayed from 4 days up to 2 weeks in some of the narrations, and then he moved to the middle of, to the center of the Medina. This is where he built the other masjid, Masjid al-Rasul, the Prophet Masjid. Now if you go to the Medina, you will visit for sure the Masjid of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we saw at that time that the importance of the masjid role in defining, first of all, the Muslim community identity, and also in highlighting the importance of the group work, the ummah work. Because I mentioned that the companions, that was the first time that they started to pray as a group, as a jama'ah. Just imagine, back in Mecca, they used to pray individual, not as a group. But the minute the Prophet ﷺ, he arrived to the Medina, the first project that he did, he built the masjid, and he told all the companions to pray in the masjid, and he make it like a must for everybody to attend. Even one of the companions, actually, he was blind, and he told them, okay, do I have an excuse, because even my home is far. He said, especially for the men, he said, no excuse for you, as long as you are hearing the nida, so the adhan, you need to come. So there was like a huge focus from the Prophet ﷺ that everybody should attend at the masjid 5 times a day. And subhanallah, even that started, the Sahaba, they started to see the Jama'ah work, because the companions, because before, just imagine, before they are praying and they are getting a reward. But immediately now the Prophet ﷺ, he's telling them, no, come and pray as a Jama'ah, and you will take 27 times from the ajr of a single prayer. So basically that concept made a paradigm shift for them, because they started now not to look at the work itself. They are starting to look at the work as a group, and it's more effective, more productive, and even more rewarded, even in the akhirah, 27 times. And that's one of the first steps that Prophet ﷺ is doing, a paradigm shift for the Muslims in Medina to start to focus on the group work, the ummah work. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with this first project, he prepared the companions with the right mindset to work, to act, even to react for their future challenges and their future projects as an ummah, not as an individuals. The ummah mindset was essential in executing all the strategic projects that we're going to talk about, because this series we are talking about all the strategic projects that the Prophet ﷺ, he executed in the Medina in building what I call the Muslim community identity. And you will notice that in building the Muslim community identity, I counted around 10 projects. The masjid was the first project, but the rest of the projects also, all of them, you will see that they need that type of mindset, the ummah mindset, not the individual mindset. So this is why the first two projects that the Prophet ﷺ started with, which is the masjid, to do that type of paradigm shift regarding the work as a group, as an ummah. And then the second project that inshallah we'll cover in the next lecture, which is the brotherhood, al-mu'akha, that happened between the muhajirin and ansar. Those two projects was like the basis for the other projects to start with and to do that type of paradigm shift in the way that they think. And we are in a dire need today to revive the ummah spirit and work in our community. We need to focus on the ummah fiqh. We call it ummah fiqh more than the minority fiqh. Now we over here as a minority, we used to follow something called minority fiqh, which is, there is a flexibility in Islam. So as a minority, for example, we are not a majority over here. This is why in the fiqh they would tell you, okay, you can deal with what you call it interest. And based on that, you can buy a house with interest in some of the, some of the fatawa. And also you can deal with the interest to do your stuff, because that's the environment. But I think this is good if you are at the start as a community. But after 1, 2, 3, 10 years, 20 years, every time we're talking about minority mindset, the ulama, they should start us to ask us, what happened to work as a group? Why you didn't build through the whole 20 or 30 years? Why you didn't build, an Islamic bank? 20 or 30 years you are coming and your approach only from a minority mindset. We should do that type of paradigm shift, the way that the Prophet ﷺ, he did it from day one. And I'm talking about those 10 projects the Prophet ﷺ, he started to execute the phase one from all of them, in all of them, within the first 100 days of his arrival to the Medina. He didn't wait for 20 or 30 years to do these type of projects. So we need to do that type of paradigm shift and that type of mindset of the ummah fiqh, and to focus on working as a group, not as an individual. My dear respected brothers and sisters, inshallah, as I mentioned, the second project that I'm going to cover, and we'll cover it inshallah next Monday, is going to talk about the brotherhood, al-mu'akha, that happened between al-muhajirin and ansar. But there is, I would like to highlight over here, before entering that project, I would like to highlight an important technique that the Prophet ﷺ used in prioritizing these projects, because as I mentioned, the Prophet, he did around 10 projects. One of the questions that came to my mind is how the Prophet ﷺ, he did the prioritizing, saying, okay, I will start with this and that project. Was it a random selection, or his approach was different? And subhanallah, in my recent study to the Prophet ﷺ seerah from strategic perspective, and I was amazed with two things that the Prophet ﷺ, he did, and you won't see them clear in the seerah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because it's hidden in the lines, and you need to read it from strategic perspective. If you don't have that type of mindset of strategic perspective and to read the seerah from that perspective, you won't be able to detect them. So the first one is the amount of the strategic project that the Prophet ﷺ, he initiated in the first 100 days of his arrival. And I mentioned, due to what I count from my study, I count around 10 projects that he established at the first 100 days of his arrival. He started phase one from those, but then he started to build at the top of those projects. And the second thing are the tools that the Prophet ﷺ, he used in prioritizing the decision making for these type of projects. His prioritization was not as a random selection, but it was based on data collected data, based on surveys, and based on consultation with his companions. So that was the three tools that the Prophet ﷺ he used in decision making. And these are crucial elements in the decision making process. When the Prophet ﷺ first came to the Medina, he was monitoring and studying the social, the economic, the political and health situation. And that's the reason why he stayed around 2 weeks at the edge of the Medina. He didn't enter for 2 weeks because he was reading, he was collecting data. He wants to see that new environment that he immigrated to, what's there. What are the resources there? What is the situation over there? So he was collecting data within these 2 weeks. And this is where most of the kutub of the Seerah, book of Seerah, they like overcome. Because you need to collect multiple hadith to see the attitude, why the Prophet ﷺ was there, and what was he collecting, and the questions that he was asking the Sahaba over there. And based on these collected information, he wants to set the priorities for which projects to start with in building the Muslim community identity, especially in the first month of his arrival. So you can say in the first 2 weeks while he was at the edge of the Medina, while he's in Quba. Then when he moved inside the Medina, while he was building the second masjid, which took from him 12 days. So during that period, you are talking about around 28, 26 days. So within those 26 days, he was collecting data, side by side with building the masjid. And the following are some of the areas that the Prophet ﷺ he monitored in the Medina. The first thing that when the Prophet ﷺ arrived to the Medina edge, to Quba, he asked the companions to count the Muslims in the Medina for him. When he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a famous hadith, he said, "Ihsu li kam yulfadul Islam." The meaning of that, count for me how many practice Islam, count for me how many Muslims. So the minute that the Prophet ﷺ arrived to the Medina, immediately he asked that question, how many Muslims? My question to you, my dear respected brothers and sisters, do you know how many Muslims we have over here? So the first thing that if you want to utilize the resources in your society or community, you have to count your resources to know exactly what type of resources you have. So the first question the Prophet ﷺ he was asking the Sahaba, count for me how many people practice or say Islam. That means they are Muslims. So the Sahaba, as the hadith mentioned, they went, the Ansar, they went and they came back and say, "Oh Prophet, we have around 600 to 700 Muslims. 600 to 700 Muslims." And in this hadith, in the comments of the scholars on this hadith, saying, okay, 600 to 700 Muslims from Al-Ansar. This is in the best scenarios. If they are from the Ansar, the Muhajirin and Ansar, from Al-Ansar, the Muhajirin is equivalent with the number. So you're talking about 1,500 maximum, 1,200 to 1,500 Muslims. And this is also another misconception that the Muslims they have. They think that the Prophet ﷺ, when he arrived to the Medina, all the people in the Medina was Muslims. That's wrong. They were a minority. And I will show you over here through what I call reverse engineering, how I managed to see the exact number or close number of the percentage of the Muslims at that time when the Prophet ﷺ arrived to the Medina. So the first thing, the number of the Muslims. So based on this hadith and based on the input that he got from Al-Ansar, they are talking about whether the Muslims as a total from Muhajirin and Ansar is 700, or in best scenarios that the 700 basically is for the Ansar, 700 for Muhajirin, so you're talking about 1,400. So that's the best scenario. Now, then the Prophet ﷺ, he extended his research by collecting the number of fighters in each tribe. And you know, the two big tribes in Medina at that time is Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. And he counted from the fighters, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, all the fighters from Al-Aws was around 1,000. And for Al-Khazraj, their percentage to the Aws was 3-1. So you're talking about 3,000. So count with me. 1,000 for Al-Aws, 3,000 for Al-Khazraj. So the total is what? 4,000 fighters. But also, you have the Jews tribes. The Jews tribes, Bani Qaynuqa 700. Bani Nadir 700, Bani Qurayza 900. So the total over here is 2,000 from the Jews, from around 2,000 to 2,300. So 2,300 and the 4,000, you're talking about the total is 6,300 fighters. Now, do you know the percentage, like what is the average military percentage in the countries worldwide? There's a percentage actually regarding the population. Do you know what is the percentage for the military? Comparing to all regarding as an average with all the countries. The percentage is 1%. So if you have a 1 million, 1% of the 1 million, which is 100,000. So this is the average, is 1%, and some of the countries, they have even less 1%. So that's the percentage right now. We will not take that percent at the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because over here, we don't have, at that time, they didn't have United Nations and more secure like rules or something like that. So let's take it to the extreme, which is 25%. Why I put 25%, not 50%? Because still in the Medina population, still you have women, children, and old people. So just imagine from every, every family, you will get one fighter as a man, one children, so 25%. So if we are talking about 25%, so you divide, based on that, 25%, and you have the number of, which is 6,300, so that means it's 4 times. So multiply it 4 times, it will be like 25,000. So now let's divide the 1,400, the maximum number of Muslims at that time, 1,400 over the 25,000. So the percentage from 5 to 6% only. The maximum is 10%. That was the percentage of the Muslims at the time when the Prophet ﷺ arrived to the Medina. They were a minority. Do you know what is the percentage of the Muslims over here in Canada? On 2021, for example, the percentage is 4.9 as an average all over Canada. In GTA, it's 9.6%. In Montreal is 8.7%. But it's different actually from one city to another. Like, because you won't find a lot of Muslims maybe in Saskatchewan or other places, but you find more concentration maybe in Mississauga. Mississauga, for example, 70%, the Muslims. If you're talking about Milton, 23%. So with our numbers, we are close or even more than the number that the Prophet ﷺ, when he arrived to the Medina, more than the number of the Muslims that the Prophet ﷺ, he had when he arrived to the Medina. But even, the interesting part, that even with that small percentage, which is, as I mentioned, 5 to 6% of the Muslim in the Medina, they were very effective. Very, very effective. Because they approached all their issues and challenges as an ummah, not as a minority. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even at that time, He was talking to them as an ummah. He didn't say, kuntum khayra minority. You were the best minority that has been raised to the people. He didn't say that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in that Quran, with that specific number, He was saying, kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You were the best nations, the best ummah that has been raised to the people. For me, the minority is not a number. It's a mindset and it's an attitude. And I believe even if our number reached to like a 50% of the population of Canada, and still our approach as an individuals, still I will call myself and our community as a minority. So it's a mindset. Just imagine the Sikh. The Sikh, their percentage is 1.4 all over Canada, where our percentage is 4.9. And with the Sikh, they have around 18 representatives in the House of Commons and in the MPs. And they have even one of their leaders for the NDP. And I think there are multiple things. Part of it is working as an ummah, but also there's another area that maybe we'll tackle it later, is the identity of the Muslim community. I talked about the identity in one of the lectures, and I highly recommend to look at this, the lecture of the identity. But I think one of the things, the issues that we don't practice properly or don't involve deeply in over here in Canada, because we have issue with the identity. We look at the identity whether you have to choose between being a Muslim or Canadian, where the identity can accommodate anything. the Muslim community or the Muslim identity, it accommodates all the identities. And we mentioned that the identities are compound identities. So there is no issue between Islam and being a Canadian. Actually, you should be as a Muslim Canadian. You should be as a Muslim merchant, Muslim teacher, Muslim student, Muslim spouse. And we mentioned it's like what do you call it, like a frame. So being a Muslim Canadian, Islam does not conflict with being a Canadian or any of your compound identity. The only thing that Islam will do, it's like a frame. Anything as a Canadian is going outside that frame, outside the bylaws and the restrictions of Islam, you don't accept it. But still you accept a lot of area being as a Canadian and as a Muslim. For example, in the Canadian bylaw, and I mentioned that before, as a Canadian bylaw, you have the ability to, the Canadian bylaw, it's permitted to drink alcohol, to commit adultery, to have boyfriend, girlfriend. In Islam, no, this is outside the frame. So Islam, it will crop whatever is outside the frame, but it will accept whatever inside. So I think we need to have that type of practice, to feel that type of ownership. And this is where you start to look for a long-term solutions and you start to put a foundation for your community. And I think this is one of the challenges. But one of the most important challenges is to think and to act as a group, as an ummah, not as individuals. Back to the areas that the Prophet ﷺ, he monitored. So once again, the first thing, the Prophet ﷺ, he collected the number of Muslims. Then the second thing, he collected the number of the non-Muslims. And it's important to practice. This is the sunnah. We need to practice this in our life over here. Not to build all our data on assumptions. Most of our data, we build it on assumptions. We should build it on an actual surveys and data that you collect from the environment. Where? Okay. The third thing that the Prophet ﷺ, he noticed, that he realized that the relationship between, I forgot to go through the presentation. So we mentioned that the masjid was the first project. The role of the masjid is the Muslim community identity and the group work. That was the first paradigm shift for the group work. Then we talked about that the ummah mindset is essential in executing all the community identities, the strategic projects, which is around 10 projects that we will talk about. And we need to focus right now on the ummah fiqh more than focusing on the minority fiqh. Then we mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, the question that came to my mind in the prioritizing, his prioritizing for the projects was not random, but based on a collected data, survey, and on consultation with his companions. And the area that the Prophet ﷺ, he monitored, the first one we mentioned, he counted the Muslims in the Medina. Then also he counted the number of fighters for each tribe. Is it okay? Oh. Yeah, that's good. I think the focus. Okay, and then count the number of fighters for the Medina. And we did like a reverse engineering to know exactly the percentage, and we mentioned that it's between 5 to 6, maximum it's going to be like 10%. And these are the numbers that we talked about, Bani Nadir, Bani Qaynuqa. The total number was 6,300, and as a 25%, we did the division, and it was like 5 to 6%. Now, the third thing that the Prophet ﷺ, he monitored is the relationship between Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, who are formed, those are the two big tribes that are forming Al-Ansar later. So he found that Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, was extremely fierce, the relationship between them, extremely fierce and right on the edge. And they could start a new war at any time. And Bu'ath war, that ended just 2 years before the arrival of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ after Bay'at al-Aqaba, was a battle that took most of their senior leaders. You know, they did like a multiple wars, and the total amount of wars that they did over 120 years or 140 years. This is mine? This is yours. Okay. So over 120 to 140 years, they were having fights. And these fights, like not continuous ones, but like they will have a fight, then they will have a rest for 1 year, 2 years, and then they initiate another war. So the latest one was Harb Bu'ath, the war of Bu'ath, the battle of Bu'ath, that took most of their senior leaders. عائشة رضي الله عنها وأرضاها, she said, كان يوم بعاث يوم قدمه الله لرسوله لأن الحرب فرقتهم وكسرتهم. The meaning of that, Aisha, she said that the day of Bu'ath, the war of Bu'ath, was a day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presented to His messenger. Because the war separated them and broke them. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he came to the Medina, they were totally exhausted. All their leaders, senior leaders were died. And just they have a new generation of leaders. So only 3 senior leaders were alive at that time when the Prophet ﷺ, he came to the Medina. The first one is Ubay ibn Salul, and the second one is Abu Amr al-Rahib, and the third one is Abu Utq. And those 3, they were troublemaker. They were the people who built a masjid, they call it Masjid Dirar. And even in the Quran mentioned that, like a way to separate or to do a division after a while in the Medina. They were a troublemaker for the Prophet. So just imagine if Bu'ath war didn't happen and he was having like 20 or 30 people from that category of senior leaders. He will have a big trouble. Actually, the rest of their leaders, because of Harb Bu'ath, they were young, such as Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, Sa'd ibn Ubadah, a new generation that they want to change their reality and to stop the long conflict and the differences between the 2 tribes. And this is, subhanAllah, make it easy for the Prophet. When he came, they were looking even for an outside solution because they have been in the war for 120 years. So the minute that the Prophet ﷺ, he came, they were looking for outside solution. Come and take the leadership. This is why Aisha, in her perspective, subhanAllah, and the hadith, she was saying it was like a gift for the Prophet. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared the area for that. But the thing that the Prophet ﷺ, he noticed, that the issue between Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj is still on the edge, at any time could initiate a war. And you will see that next time when we talk about the Mu'akha, what the Prophet ﷺ, he did to mitigate that issue. Also, the Prophet, he knew that the Jews who migrated to the Medina, coming from Bilad al-Sham, escaping from the persecution of a Roman, they played a major role in igniting these wars. So these wars that happened between Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, it didn't happen from thin air. There was a reason behind it. Basically, the Jews in the Medina, they were working on that because from their side, their benefit is to make the two parties weak. And while they are fighting together, they will be stronger than them. So they will keep initiating these type of war. Whenever it goes down, they initiate that war. So their target was to weaken the stronger parties in the Medina and to benefit from that politically and economically. Actually, they were selling the arms for both parties. And they were having like a very big business for arms. So they ignite the war and they sell the arms to the 2 parties. So that's a good business, and at the same time from political aspect. And they used to sell the arms and the swords for both parties from Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj for more than 120 years. So that's a good business. The 5th point, also the Prophet ﷺ, he found that the Medina's market, Medina has 6 markets. A lot of people, they have a perception that when the Prophet ﷺ, he came, he founded or he established the Medina's market. No, before the Medina market, there were 6 markets in the Medina. And the gold, so the 6 markets, all the 6 markets, the gold, the weaponry, the best farms in the Medina, and most of the fertile lands, and even the best water wells, were all with the Jewish people. Because Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, they were busy in killing each other. So they don't even have a time. They spend all their resources in killing each other and even their money, and even they didn't have a time to have farms. So most of the farms was owned by the Jews over there. And even they make the Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj work as workers, as farmers in those farms. So that the Prophet ﷺ also detected. Also the Prophet ﷺ, he found that most of Al-Ansar from Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, they were poor and middle class. Few of them, they were millionaires or they were rich, but most of them, they were poor. A lot of us, we used to think that Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, they were rich. And that's only because of their great giving, subhanAllah, al-ithar. And that was a well-known characteristic with Al-Ansar. This is why the people, they have a perception that they were rich, which gave them the impression of that they were rich. So the seventh point, point number 7, add to this that he knew sallallahu alaihi wasallam that most of the muhajirin that they came before him and even came after him, most of them, they left their money, their wealth, their families in Mecca, and they were now in a new land with no housing, no shelter, no food, no work, and they came to an agriculture city where most of them are merchants and they don't have a clue about agriculture. And add to this, most of them, they got sick with the Medina fever, and they were in a horrible psychological condition, and they needed an immediate financial and moral support. So this is how the Prophet ﷺ detect within those 14 days that he spent at the edge of the Medina. He was detecting all these information, collecting these information. This is how the Prophet ﷺ observed the Medina status upon his arrival. We learn from that the importance of studying the reality of every land that we immigrate to, and in a comprehensive and a precise way. And these studies will help us to formulate the needed projects that the Muslim community they need, and to identify the priorities based on the issues that they have. And based on that precise studying and monitoring for the Medina status, the Prophet ﷺ, he decided to begin first by integrating the Muslim community together as a top priority before integrating them with the Medina multicultural and multi-religion society. Because we mentioned that the Medina was a multicultural and multi-religion society. And even before talking about the economic and political and health projects, because before proceeding in these projects, you have to work all together as an ummah, to think together as an ummah. Inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the next lecture, we will explore together how the Prophet ﷺ, he did the brotherhood, the mu'akha, between al-muhajirin and al-ansar, and between the muhajirin, the immigrants, and the supporter. The last thing that, as I promise you with my lecture, that I will end it with, I will conclude my lecture with a set of lessons learned, recommendations, and even suggested projects related to the subject of the lecture, in a way to transfer whatever we learn from that seerah, to transfer it to our reality over here. And I will share with you, and I would like also to hear from you at the same time, regarding the points that we mentioned and how to reflect that in our reality. But it comes to my mind one suggestion. This suggestion is to build a specialized Islamic research center. I highly recommend the necessity of having a specialized Islamic research center to study the reality here in Canada from social, economic, political, legal, and environmental dimension. Nowadays, the Muslim community problems and challenges here in Canada is more complicated, and they are really deep, and they are connected even together. They are connected to one another. And we need a deep, thorough, and multi-level analysis and solution approach based on a precise collected data, not assumptions, and discussed by a dedicated group of specialists. So the specialized Islamic research center, it's not like most of the people when I talk about research center, they will go to like a university that they give a degree. No, I'm not talking about degrees. I'm talking about collecting data and using this data in proposing, discovering the issues that we have and proposing solutions. The Specialized Islamic Research Center, first of all, it will conduct its studies by a dedicated group of specialists related to the subject. And I call them like a stakeholder. Let's say I want to talk about let's say the education over here in Canada. It's a big problem that we are facing because some of them, they're talking about the values right now, what they teach for our kids. But you cannot take it like from away, like just take it from outside. You need to dig deep in it. And the way to dig deep in it, maybe I'm not the person to be in that type of group, but you need a person who is specialized in education, another one which is, let's say, a principle, a third one in the curriculum, a fourth one in psychology, another one in sociology, a fourth one or a fifth one in Sharia, another one in politics, in policies, public policies. So when they talk about the subject, they will talk about it from 360 degree. Each one will cover a specific area of his specialty. This is how you discover how deep is your problem. Because if you analyze your problem in a shallow way, you will have a shallow solutions. And this is why we don't solve the issues that we have. So we need type of specialized people to be dedicated, and those people, they change according to the subject that we're gonna discover or do the research on it. Also, it will help us to evaluate, prioritize, and contribute in solving the Muslim community and even the... But when he sees it 360 degree and he will listen to the person in politics, its effect on politics, and he will listen to the other person in psychology, in sociology, in this and that, this will give him a 360, and this will do a huge revolution in the fiqh. We will start to see the fiqh is touching our life, and it's solving our issues. One of the main reasons why the fiqh is not touching our life, because we don't analyze properly our life. We don't analyze properly the situation that we have. And the fourth important point from this specialized Islamic Research Center, it will assist the Islamic institutions and organizations to do what I call strategic decision making. You know, in taking the decisions, there are two stages: decision making and decision taking. In your life, in your day, you will do hundreds of decisions. A decision from I want to drink this water to I want to drive to that specific place. So those are small decisions. So you do the decision making and taking at the same time. But the more complicated is your decision, and the more long-term decision that it will affect you on your life, let's say buying a house or immigrating here to Canada. So you have to do two steps: decision making and decision taking. The decision making, which is studying the situation properly and to see, okay, how to tackle this issue. And then you create different scenarios, scenario 1, 2, 3, 4. And even for each scenario, you put evaluation for each point you want to achieve. And based on that, you create what we call a risk mitigation, that there is a risk in any of those four, let's say, decisions. There is a risk, and you see how to mitigate this risk. So you can say, okay, this decision with a high risk, this one decision with a lower risk, but there's a value for that specific decision. You know, the White House, when they do the decision, it's not Bill Biden, he takes the decision basically. He will send it, they have more than 17 different research centers. Each center is specialized in a specific area, let's say one in the Middle East, or maybe 2 or 3 in the Middle East. You will find there are sections even in each research center, one for Iraq, one for Saudi Arabia, one for a specific country. And they will tell them, okay, we want to take a decision on this area. Can you study it for us? So it will give them like 2 or 3 or 1 month. They will do a study from specialists, 360 degree, with different type of specialists. And then they will create for him 4 or 5 solutions. And they will say, this is solution we consider as solution A, this is solution B, this is solution C, D. And they will put the rest. So when it comes to Biden, he will be easily saying, okay, I will go with A or go with B, or I will combine between A and B. And he can do another 5th solution, but it will be much easier for him. I think one of the disasters that we have over here in the Muslim community, sometimes like a group of people, they will take a decision, okay, we want to buy a center. They buy the center, and then they found that the center is it's not in the zone of being, they want to buy a school. And they found that the zoning is not in the school zoning. It's they are not allowing them to build a school. And they will take around maybe 10 years to struggle with the government to be able to take that license. And collecting the donations, and this, like, it will exhaust the community, because the community they will give it donations, but they don't see results. And that's a disaster. So the bigger the problem that you have, or the bigger the decision that you have, you need to include more people to do the decision making. So this is one of the items of the Sunnah that we need to revive, that the Prophet ﷺ, he practiced. And we need, for me, right now, a lot of people, they build schools, they build masajid. But what we need urgently right now from strategic part and from the strategic Sunnah that we see over here is to build a research center that study our situations and our problems and build some solutions for it. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وجزاكم الله خيرا على حسن الاستماع. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all for listening to that, and inshallah I will take your, first of all, your questions related to that, and
Isha and then questions?
whatever, but if you want to Salah Isha, and questions, and also any recommendations or projects that you propose that align with what we learned today from the Seerah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Okay, back to our session. Now we will hear your questions, and also if you have comments, and also if you have suggestions regarding the things that we mentioned.
The first question was, how do we create a shift in society if the government structure in Canada is against us?
How to create what?
A shift in society if the government structure is against us.
Shift in what? In the way of thinking?
Yeah.
Okay. The first thing, no, the government is not against you. No, the government is not against you. And don't take it in this perception. Look at the amount of freedom that you have. A huge amount of freedom. You can work anything, you can do anything. Even the people of al-batil, of the wrong thing, they are doing things even we don't imagine, and they put it as a bylaws right now. So the point, don't look at the restrictions as much as looking at the freedom that you have. And you have the ability to create whatever you want. Create organizations coming together. I think most of the restrictions that we have, it's not in the bylaws. It's the mentality that we came with from our countries. The restrictions that we came with in our heads from our countries. You know, there's a unique, a story about the elephant. What is the small elephant? What do you call it? The small elephant, the baby elephant.
I don't think there's an name for it.
The baby elephant. The baby elephant, after they born, in India, they used to put a lock on his foot, but this lock from a wooden lock, okay, a wooden lock, and it's connected with a chain in the ground. So the small elephant, it will start to pull it, won't be able to pull it. So it will take in its perception after a few months, that's it. This is unbreakable. The amazing part, or the strange part, that it will grow up and it become like 5-10 times bigger than an adult, elephant. And it won't dare even to break it. Even if it has the ability just to move it like that, it will take the whole chain out. But it put the restriction in their mentality that I cannot break it. So sometimes when you experience that type of restriction at your homeland or country, from economic, political, anything, when we come over here, we carry that type of restrictions with us. Prophet ﷺ, he didn't carry that restriction. In Mecca, he was totally restricted from dealing even with others. After they knew that he is calling for Islam, they started to put a lot of restrictions on him. Even before his arrival to the Medina, by 2 years or 3 years, they did economic sanction on him for 1.5 years and up to 3 years in some of the narrations, where he lost his wife and he lost his uncle after that sanction. But when he came to Medina, from day one he was working like 24/7, as if he's racing with the time, as if he's gonna just live for a year. But because he saw the level or the high, high ceiling of freedom. So we need to utilize that. And we have a very high ceiling of freedom. And if we don't utilize it, after a while, we will lose it. Next. Questions? Yeah. Yes,
Me?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I really liked your point about establishing research centers and facilities and doing that data collection. Right? But from a university student standpoint, it seems like kind of a grand scale. And with the point that you made that we see ourselves as a minority, it's not just the issue of governments. It feels like the governments are restricting us, but also our own people. We have a lot of Muslims, mashallah, 4.9%, like you said, compared to 6, which are 1%, right?
Yeah.
But even within us, we have our own organizations.
Yeah.
I don't want to name them, but there's so many different ones. And
Organizations.
masjids themselves, they have their own. If they have their own issues, they just break off and make their own stuff, right? So how do we, as university students, as Canadians that are second, third gen, growing up, because university is the one place where we can actually be united. After that, we can go off and start making our own stuff. So from university, how can we start, what the Prophet did, for example?
Very good question. I think one of the things that you shouldn't have comparing to the previous generation is that you don't have that type of restriction of dealing with each other. And the unity should be much easier for you comparing maybe to the older generation. Although older generation, they carry with them what you call it, the ethnic and other stuff, which is away from Islam. But they carry these things, even inside. Like this is why even when they come over here, they create a tribal system again. They will create the communities, one for Arab, one for Afghani, one for Pakistani, one for... What are you doing? You are creating again a tribal form, but in a different names. The issue over here in Islam, it doesn't have an issue with the tribes. Like it's good to have that type, that type of variety and diversity. It's very good. But the point, don't isolate yourself. It's good to have a multiple organizations, but don't isolate yourself within the walls of the organization or the membership of the organization, and don't see the other. We should work together, and we should look at each other that we are completing each other, not competing with each other. And don't think that you are the only one who is reviving Islam. You need to look at the bigger picture, that whatever I do, I need my brothers and I need my sisters. One of the issues, because the vision is limited and we are just seeing Islam as just individual sunnahs. We see Islam only just a masjid and a school, that anybody can do it by himself. But when we start to see these projects that I'm gonna talk about, which is building, for example, a bank. This cannot be done by one organization. It should be with multiple organizations. And this is where they have to come together to work together. When we talk about, let's say, facing whatever they are promoting right now in the schools, from values maybe against our religion. This, you cannot face it as one organization. You need to work as a group. And I think the need is there, and we have all the elements, but we need to bring them together. And I believe your generation is very good to bring them together and to promote that. And when you work with these type of projects, your approach from beginning to work together. Your approach, I'm seeing each other. I want to utilize everybody's resources. I want to look outside my university. I'm looking for even the resources as the Muslims, even outside my masjid, outside my ethnicity. You need to make it a bigger scope. And to start immediately with projects, work it together, because this is how you build the ummah. The ummah concept does not come with lectures. Even if I mentioned like for you, 100 lecture. We took 100 lecture talking about ummah. The ummah work will not activate unless you sit down on a table and work together in a project. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he did. From the first few days, he built the masjid, so they started to work together and to pray together. Then he did the brotherhood, and immediately, project after project, he put for them the wathiqa, the document. Then he put for them the building the market. solving the what do you call it, the health issue, solving the environment issues, education issues. So from one project to another, and this is how you build the Ummah concept. The Ummah concept is like the teamwork. If I want to teach my kids about teamwork, if I keep giving them lectures day and night, they will not understand it. But I will just give them the guidelines, one lecture or two, then immediately I put them on a table, and I will give them, maybe at the beginning, I will give them, what do you call it, straws or toothpicks. Build a bridge together. So I will know that at the beginning they will fight. They will not build a bridge, because this is the first time they are dealing with each other. And one of them, they will say, no, I will not work with the others. The other, I'm a perfection guy. The others, they will make it like 50%. I want to make it 100%. Third one, no, I want everything in my name. You will see that in the organization when you put them together. This is why we need to put a code of conduct, a type of ethics, and the Ummah work is more deeper in the concept than the teamwork. So when I push them together to work together, so they will work, maybe they will fight at the beginning, but at the beginning they will start to see, okay, this person is better than me in building, the other one is better than me in drawing, the third one, so he started to see that they are completing them. Then I give them another project, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and this is where the teamwork skills start to develop. And this is why right now, even in the professionals, you will find people that they are good in their teamwork, others they are not good in teamwork. Because those, they did it 100 times, those they did it only 2 or 3 times. The Ummah work is the same approach. This is why they will tell you, a lot of people, that we try to work together, but we fail, because basically they didn't move it from the theoretical to the practical dimension. And even they didn't put like, what do you call it, a code of conduct for it from the beginning. And also, they didn't continue by giving another, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth project. Add to this, they didn't have the need. If you're talking about 20 years ago, these issues that we are having right now, we didn't have it at that time. The biggest issue that they have is Al-Hilal. That, okay, Ramadan started or not. So they were disputing and they were not agreeing with each other. But now, it's not in the sky anymore. It's touching their homes, touching their kids. So the need is there. And you need just to be like a catalyst to bring them all together on a table, and let's work. If you cannot bring them, at least bring the people who agree with you. And let's show them the model how we work together. And do the first, create just a momentum. Even with 1 or 2 or 3 organizations, it shouldn't be like all of them should be mosques. You can bring NCCM, you bring something from political area, like stakeholders from different lawyers and maybe professionals and other stuff to work on a specific project. But when you succeed, this will create a momentum and you will start to see other people, they are joining you. And this is how you build the Ummah. The Ummah is a practical thing, is the way that you build the teamwork. And I think the new generation over here, they have a lot of things that they can make it successful, inshallah. Any other question?
Yes. So one person asked that they have 2 masjids next to their house that are always fighting. Would one of them be considered masjid darar because they lowering the community's wealth and being active? And how do they bring the 2 masjids together?
They are fighting?
Yeah. So 2 masajid fighting. Would one of them be considered masjid darar because they're lowering the community's wealth, both of them being active? And then how do they join the 2 masajid together?
First of all, you need to work with the management, their management, to bring them together. Maybe the people, sometimes if the management, they don't listen to that, sometimes you need to work with the people and to start to show them the bigger vision. That the masjid, the role of the masjid is to bring the people together, not to make the people and dispute with each other. That's one of the main messages of the masjid, to bring the people together. So, and we are completing each other. And you can create, what you call it, some programs, like a joint program among them, like bring a good speaker from here to there, bring another speaker to there. Try to get their management to talk together. If you find the issue with the management, in that case, try to reach to the people maybe the people, when they understand, they will put a pressure on their management, and then sometimes they change their management to do that main change. But tell them that the difference is not good for us as Muslims.
And then there's a few questions about permissibilities. So there's one about some scholars who disagree about having Muslims in Western nations' government, and some of them will say it's haram. And then there's another question about voting in Canada, the permissibility of that, and if it's halal, how do you choose to vote? How do you choose who you vote for if almost all of them have permitting something haram?
Now, I think one of the issues that it makes the people go to that type of extreme thinking that this is haram and I'm so isolated and I shouldn't join that. The first question that comes to my mind, that why you come? Why you come over here? You come over here as a Muslim, okay? And you have been accepted over here with the country. The country open their arms for you and they give you a freedom of speech, a freedom of work, so you can work. And it's a multicultural, multi-religion society. And they give you the freedom to practice your religion. Now, being part of the community and being integrated in the community, that's the issue. Over here, you have to make sure that when you do the integration, do it in a proper way. Because don't do the integration, that means that you will be totally dissolved in the community and lose your identity. This is not integration, this is a dissolving. And the society over here, the Canada, will tell you, keep your identity. We want you to keep that a multi-diverse community. And they urge you to do that. And they want you to do that. So keep your identity, but don't call for isolation. And this is against Islam. And this is a misconception about the identity. The one that I mentioned over here. That Islam, that the identity, first of all, they have to understand that the identity is a compound. It's a multi-thing. And Islam does not come to remove your identities. No, it will keep them, but it will organize them. It will make them synchronize, working together. And also it color them with the ibadah concept. And also the most important thing, it will put a border for it. Because there is a huge area in all the dimensions of the identity that you can work with it. And if you don't want to work in the politics, this will affect all the policies, and it will affect even the ceiling of freedom that you're going to have and experience. And in the Shara, ما لا يتم الواجب به فهو واجب, that if this wajib does not happen except with this thing, so this thing is become wajib. So from that concept, the person has to go deeper in the fiqh and deeper in understanding the identity and in the understanding the concept of Islam is not contradicting with the identity. And there's a huge area that we can work together. And I think this is one of the reasons why we stay over here for 20 and 30 years and we are dealing with the society as if we are packing our bags and we want just to take a benefit from it and go back home. It shouldn't be like that. This is your country. And you should change that mentality. I want to build in this country. I want to benefit the Muslims and even the non-Muslims. I want to benefit my country. And this is part of the da'wah. Part of the da'wah, sometimes the people, they have a misconception about building the Islamic projects over here, like what do you call it, Islamic bank. You think that this is benefit only for the Muslims? It's benefit also for the non-Muslims. Because now they are having issues right now with the inflation and with the interest rate that they are increasing it. So just imagine if you have a bank without that interest rate. 0 interest rate. This will change the whole concept and you will find more of the non-Muslims are working with you. And this is why, to build that project, you will find the big 5 banks, they will stand in front of you. Because they know if you put that project, it's a danger on their project. It's good to promote these type of projects, to work with these projects and to show the benefit of it even for the non-Muslims. And this is a part of da'wah. This is how they enter Islam, not the opposite way. Allah.
And then the last one is, are there any good or any Islamic research center in Canada?
Any?
Islamic research centers in Canada.
Most of the research centers, to my knowledge, maybe I don't know that much, but there are some research center in recent research centers, they have it in US. But in Canada, most of it, their approach is like academic, that they want to give certificate or academy. No, it's not, I'm not talking about university. I'm talking about something with the reality come, because the problems that we have is so complicated. We need people to be dedicated and specialists to work together to analyze these problems, to collect data, not build it on assumptions, and to create for us multiple solutions to do the decision making. Because all these type of solutions, it's a long term, and it will consume from us a lot of effort, a lot of work, and it will consume from us not only one organization, multiple organizations should work on this one. This is why we want to make sure that the decision is correct. We want to make sure when you put your ladder, to put it on the right wall, not to put it on the wrong wall. So the research center, it will give you where is the right wall to put it. Okay? Any questions? I cannot see from the light. So,
You want me to lower the light?
okay, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So is the basic, without the Prophet and coming to the masjid with his companions, isn't it that the most basic is neglected? So if you have the most basic step forward that's not being put in forward, how can you accumulate any other further steps? Like, isn't it that the first step is that they would come to the masjid as their group companion and discuss it on a constant basis, on a consistent basis?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking that the first step is neglected. Like, how many people in Canada actually go to the masjid to pray and they come together and plan and execute?
Yeah, you need to change that mentality and to make them work. But it doesn't mean like you can work on these things in parallel. Like while you are working on this and building it and enhancing and adjusting the knowledge of the people and to show them that this is important. It doesn't matter, like you can work also other things, to work it together, bring all the masajid coming together, increase the awareness, this is part of it. But you need to work in parallel. It's not like a serial thing, one after another. What's amazed me with the Prophet ﷺ, in the first 100 days, he was opening the 10 projects at the same time. Maybe the only 2 projects that worked at the beginning, which is the masjid and the masjid and the mu'akha, which is the difference between them like a month or even less than that. But at the same time, he opened the project for the souk, the market, the economy, the political, the social, restructure the concept of the family with Surah Al-Baqarah, raising the kids, Al-Amr Ma'ruf Nahy Al-Munkar, the medical reform, the environmental reform, the media reform. All of them, they were at the same time, but doing it in phases, like they would start in phases. And the beautiful thing about it, that when you work with all of them, this will show you the, subhanAllah, the comprehensiveness of Islam, and they will support each other. The more people that you let them work, sometimes they start to attend the masjid because now they see it more realistic. And they see that they are joining other projects, they come to talk about it and to discuss with it. So they support each other. But don't work it seriously. Work it parallel. This is the way the Prophet ﷺ worked it parallel. You know like what? The Prophet ﷺ, when he built like the building, when you build a skyscraper, this way that you build it, I found like in the first phase, you will put 10 poles. Each one is a project, okay? This is phase 1. Then you add those poles, the 10 poles, the masjid, the economy, but it's phase 1. But then at the top of it, you put, because you have the 10 poles, now you have the ability to put, what do you call it, a ceiling. Because it needs all the 10 poles, okay? Then you start to go to the second floor, where you put also another 10 poles and go to the ceiling. So each year, from the 10 years of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in any phase, in any time, when you look at the first year, the second, the third year, you will find him, he is progressing in a balanced way in all the 10 projects. This is the way that he built, and this is the way that we build the building. And this is why in any year when you come and look Islam, you can see it clear as an Islam, as a full Islam, as a full, you can see that, oh, he's building a skyscraper. Because you see it as a full floor. But the way that we are building right now, we are building serially. What we're gonna do? For 10 years, we are just building masajid. And we are building schools. Just imagine, we are building like poles up to 20 floors. Can you build a skyscraper like that? You won't be able to put what you call it, a ceiling on them. And the issue that anybody comes and look at it, he said, what are you doing? Even he doesn't understand what are you building. And that's the reason why the new generation, if you want to ask them about Islam, they don't have a clue about it. Because they don't see it. They see like a deformed building. They don't see the comprehensive Islam. They didn't see a full floor. They see just a distorted image, just two poles saying, no, we are building Islam. But no economy, no banks, no politics existing for us, because each one will support each other. Especially on the big projects. The big projects, you need those big poles. You need 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 poles if you want to put the ceiling. If you want to put a primary wall, you need at least 2 or 3 poles. And this is why we fail in doing the big projects. Doing the bank, you need to have politics, you need to have people in economy, you have to have community access to put petitions for 1 million people or something like that. If you don't have these poles there, you won't be able to build your project. The maximum that you can do a rally. A rally is just like a partition. The rallies that we are doing, nothing. It's just a partition. It shows, it gives you a voice, but what's next? You need to build something project. And this is where you need to change the way that we work. We need to work in parallel, not serial. And that's the minhaj of Prophet Muhammad. That's the methodology of Prophet in building. And that's one of the conclusions that I reached to when I finished the research. That's one of the things that I noticed. And we should change our approach in the way that we build the community. Wallah. Any questions, comments, ideas? Okay, at least any of you will take a lead in building a research center, inshallah. Build the research center, inshallah. You are in the research area. You can build those research centers, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you for your attendance and for your patience. صلى الله عز وجل أن يعلمنا ما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمنا ويزيدنا علما وفقها في الدين. وجزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.